Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now the Friday Crime Report. Stillwater, Oklahoma, Friday, February 2nd, 2024. Jesse Butler was accused of raping at least two of his 16-year-old girlfriends. During one incident, he strangled one when she refused to have sex with him. The strangulation caused damage to the victim's neck, which subsequently required surgery.
The teenage girl needed surgery to repair the damage done to her neck by the strangulation. And her doctor told her that she would have died had that strangulation lasted another 30 seconds. The girl said that she gave in to Jesse Butler because he threatened to kill her, and he threatened to kill her family if she didn't give in.
But she wasn't the only one. Later the same year, Butler was accused of being violent towards another girlfriend, also 16. She said she sometimes went along with what he wanted so that he wouldn't hurt her. In one instance, Butler strangled her until she passed out while he recorded the assault. Police later found the recording on his phone. When the police finally got around to arresting him, he was charged as an adult with a slew of offenses, which, truth be told, weren't as severe as they should have been. But we've all seen this movie before, and we know exactly how it ends. Like Brock Turner and Drew Clinton before him, teenage rapists who were caught dead to rights, Jesse Butler's white privilege kicked in, and the DA quietly made a backroom deal with him where they would change him from being an adult offender to instead being a youthful offender so he could get a lighter, read no sentence. The DA did this over the objections of the victims' families, and of course the judge immediately agreed, didn't even bother to ask if this was improper. As we've seen in other cases like the murders of Ahmaud Arbery's federal trial, the judges have the final say over plea deals. If they reject them, then they can't go through. But we understand that this wasn't about the law, it was about racial immunity from the law. And what sentence did Jesse Butler get? He remains under the Office of Juvenile Affairs Supervision until his 19th birthday. He's going to have to go to counseling, therapy, more than 100 hours of community service, a curfew, no social media, daily check-ins, and weekly counseling sessions. This is what he gets for raping two teenage girls. And if he completes the program, then his criminal record will disappear, and most importantly, he will not have to register as a sex offender. So that's all he's got to do, just basically coast until next year when he turns 19. He does about a year or so of community service and a little so-called counseling, and he walks away from this as if nothing had happened. He won't even have to register as a sex offender, which means that this entire crime of raping two teenage girls is being memory holed, and that what happens in just a few years when it becomes old news, because the white media is going to let this one die a quiet death, and then they'll just go ahead and forget about it. He gets to get on with his life as if he didn't do anything wrong. Maybe R. Kelly, Bill Cosby, and P. Diddy, they should have hired this guy's lawyers, or maybe Brock Turner's lawyers, or Drew Clinton's lawyers, because these three white rapists who committed crimes far worse than anything those black celebrities were ever accused of, they all walked scot-free and they did it easily. See, this is how important it is to be white under a system of white supremacy. That's more important than the law. There's a lot of people who are making a big deal out of the fact that Butler's father used to be an athletic director at OSU back in the day. But please, do you think it was really his father's 20-year-old employment that got this guy this kind of treatment? Is that how it was for Brock Turner or Drew Clinton? Of course not. And just to put things in perspective for you, this rapist, his collective years would have added up to 78 years behind bars, but he won't have to serve a day of it. And while it's nice that you got some corn-pone politicians who are claiming to be on fire about this, reality is that unlike with Bill Cosby or R. Kelly, none of these white politicians are going to write legislation specifically to go after the next Jesse Butler, just like they didn't write any legislation to go after Brock Turner or Drew Clinton. Because under white supremacy, there's a conspiracy of silence. Sure, there's plenty of people from the dominant society who don't like that the Jesse Butlers and Brock Turners and other reprobates can commit rapes and even murders and not be touched by the law. But those same outraged members of the dominant society also understand that if they cut the cord that connects Jesse Butler to his white privilege, then they also cut the cord that connects them to their own. All of them rely on it. Sure, some go and do violent acts that hurt other members of the dominant society, but unless it's some mass casualty event, it's never considered serious. It's all just part of the dirty business of maintaining white supremacy, and that's why all the outrage and gnashing of teeth will ultimately mean nothing, until the lawmakers and prosecutors respond to the Jesse Butlers the same way they lost their minds and went into hysterics over, hell, just name any black person accused of jaywalking. then Jesse Butler can bide his time, wait until next year, and then go about looking for his next victim. And as we've seen with Ethan Couch, even if he violates his plea deal, he'll still get a slap on the wrist. It's not about the criminal offense. It's not about the sentence. It's not about the law. It's about a two-tiered racist injustice system that selectively charges or excuses people based on their race and nothing else. It's been very difficult to find out who the judge on this case is. The white media's stories about it refuse to even name this person, but with a lot of digging, you can eventually find out that it's Judge Susan Worthington. Now, there were a lot of people who are surprised, just absolutely shocked that a female judge would go ahead and give this dead-to-rights rapist a slap on the wrist and make sure that he got away with it. But you shouldn't be. It's the same thing that I've been telling you for the longest time. White women understand the rules of racism just like everyone else, and they also understand that their position in the world wasn't the result of their gender. It was the result of their race. That's the tie that binds. That's what they actually rely on. Just like the white women who could not wait to vote for Donald Trump, even though the guy had been caught on video saying that he grabs white women by their genitals. And that still didn't dampen any of his political support among white women voters. In fact, his support went up the more times that he ran for president. Think about it. P. Diddy's doing years in prison, and R. Kelly is doing decades in prison, and neither one of them was even accused of anything even remotely close to what this punk did. These are two wealthy black men. To hear the white media shills like Kamal Dumbbell tell it, they've got power. And yet these two rich and powerful black men are in prison. Meanwhile, this white offender, who comes from a regular white family, is going home free as a bird. He didn't have money. So how did he get the kind of sentence that rich and powerful black men can't even pay for? For the same reason Brock Turner and Drew Clinton did, and Ethan Couch and countless others. Racial immunity from the law. That's why this happened. These are not a bunch of accidents and happenstance and a bunch of coincidences. This is the system working exactly the way that it's intended to. Clearly, inarguably, there is an unspoken rule among these judges that when it comes to black offenders, you throw the book at them, but if they're white, anything that's a felony automatically gets downgraded to a misdemeanor, and when it comes time for sentencing, you go ahead and give them a slap on the wrist. This is deliberate and intentional on the prosecutors and the judges' part, and we know that it's intentional because of how consistently they do it. And white society understands that that's also the case for them as well. That's the reason why the white right-wing nuts were so furious about that judge in D.C. who gave the appropriate and proper charge to those two black teens who were accused of trying to carjack big balls. If brutally beating and raping two girls, nearly killing one of them, amounts in no prison time, then why would two kids accused of trying to take someone's car even matter? Because under white supremacy, it's not the offense that matters. It's the color of the person being accused. And people also need to be reminded that when Judge Aaron Persky, who was the guy who was responsible for allowing Brock Turner to walk free, got voted out of office, the white media, including your so-called liberal networks, were going into hysterics saying that now judges will be terrified not to throw the book at people whether they deserve it or not. And the line that all of these white liberal writers were using was that black defendants were the ones who should be most concerned because if these judges get punished for not giving harsh sentences, black defendants are going to catch the worst of it. Of course, that was years ago, and what's happened since then? We've seen that nothing's changed. All that happened was the white media was concerned that if you start having judges being punished for upholding white privilege and white immunity from the law, then, well, hell, a lot of them are going to wind up going to jail. That's what they were really concerned about. Their own racial privilege. These white supremacists know it too. That's why in recent years, they've been on a ruthless campaign to conceal the identities of these judges and make it as hard as possible to learn exactly who it is who's been enabling these criminals to commit their crimes. That's the reason why the judge in this case had her identity basically scrubbed from the internet. Both the authorities and the white media have been on code to keep these judges' identities secret. That's the reason why it mattered what happened with the murder of Breonna Taylor, because the judge in that case, who went ahead and became a rubber stamp for that no-knock warrant, she had a history of doing that for the police. There was no warrant or affidavit that they put in front of her that she could not wait to sign. Didn't matter if it was legal or not. In the case of Breonna Taylor, it was a pack of lies. At the very least, she should have charged the police with perjury because they lied for the basis of the warrant. But she didn't. And that's the reason why the white media and the authorities have been doing everything that they can to censor the names of these judges. This is the indisputable proof that both the white media and the white state are doing everything they can to conceal the bad actors who they depend on for their color-coded injustice system. And while the mothers of the two victims are angry, they should also think about how racist the system they live under is and how corrupt the good old boy network of Oklahoma is. White privilege hurts everyone, including those classified as white, because it makes it impossible for the law to ever be applied. At every level, from the police to the prosecutors to the judges to the white media, there's all these individuals who are in place to make sure that the law only applies when they want it to, and that all depends on the color of the person in front of them. Jesse Butler's victims and their families should also be calling out the corrupt politicians in Oklahoma who protect these rapists by not using their political offices to craft legislation to go after them. The now former Oklahoma State School Superintendent Ryan Walters was on a jihad about critical race theory and DEI and the 3 R's while he was at it, but he didn't care about children being raped in the school system that he was allegedly administering. This is what his priority was, not the education of the children and definitely not their safety, but chasing one asinine culture war hobby horse after the next. But understand, the problem here isn't a criminal justice problem. The problem here is a white privilege problem. When a black teen is accused of anything, they get the opposite treatment. Nobody moves their case from adult court to youthful offender court. It goes in the opposite direction. They go from being charged as a youthful offender to being charged as an adult. While one can hope that something happens, cross your fingers, that makes it where this guy has to face some sort of real consequences, the reality is, if Brock Turner and Drew Clinton are any indication, whatever happens will be simply for him alone and nobody else. This is the pattern. When these kind of stories first break and the public's watching these crooked prosecutors initially giving these guys felony charges, people look and say, oh, okay, they're getting charged with something harsh. But as soon as the cameras go away, the old white privilege two-step kicks off and the charges are immediately reduced to misdemeanors, and these corrupt judges give them no prison time at all, which is basically an acquittal from the bench. This is the white authorities burying a prosecution, same as they do when a white cop murders a black citizen. This goes to show the problem isn't qualified immunity, the problem is racial immunity from the law. And as for Jesse Butler, I think we can all agree that if he's already raped 2 teenage girls before he's even 18 years of age, it won't be long at all before he's back in trouble again. And whatever it is, it won't be child's play. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones the white corporate media chooses to show you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Robert Cook, Chandler Glover, Richard Griffith, E. Rock, and D. Sherrod. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.